Leave your million-dollar drilling rigs and get off my construction site immediately. Ryan Sterling screamed in my face, waving a fake inspection report. I smiled coldly, walked to my truck, and signed the bank covenant freeze. By Monday morning, his $60 million commercial project went completely dark. The police cruiser sat at the entrance of the Austin job site, its blue lights painting the concrete dust in strobes. Ryan Sterling stood next to the officer, his hard hat pristine, his face purple as he pointed his finger at my face. "Arrest him," he screamed. "He's trespassing on my site." I didn't say a word. I just reached into my vest, pulled out the certified copy of the Travis County Sheriff's lockup order and handed it to the officer. "Actually," I said, "as of 9 o'clock this morning, this entire site belongs to me. But to understand how we got there, you have to go back to where it all began, 22 years ago. I founded Miller Foundations and Structural in 2004 with a single-used Bobcat, a beat-up flatbed truck, and 3 guys who weren't afraid of hard labor. Austin was a different city back then, a sleepy college town just beginning to feel the tremors of the tech boom. Over the next 2 decades, I poured my life, my sweat, and my savings into the dirt of Central Texas. We specialized in the hard stuff, deep foundation, drilling, structural concrete, and retaining systems. If you wanted to build a skyscraper on Austin's notoriously unstable clay and limestone, you called me. I knew the soil reports like the back of my hand. I knew exactly how deep a drilled shaft had to go to hit solid bedrock, and I knew how to handle the bentonite slurry to keep the shafts from collapsing before we could drop the rebar cages. By 2026, my company had grown to 40 full-time employees, operating 2 massive IMT drilling rigs, each worth over $1 million. We were known for doing things the right way, on time, and strictly by the book. Then came the Sterling Plaza project. It was a planned $60 million commercial retail and office development in the hot North Austin corridor. The owner was Sterling Development Corp., a family-owned firm run by Arthur Sterling, a 58-year-old developer who had built a solid reputation over 30 years. Arthur was old school. We had worked together on a couple of smaller office parks in the 2010s, and a handshake from Arthur was as good as a bank guarantee. But Arthur had a blind spot, and that blind spot was his nephew, Ryan Sterling. Ryan was 34, possessed a fresh MBA from a prestigious East Coast school, and wore custom-tailored suits to dusty job sites. He had recently been appointed as the project director for Sterling Plaza, and he made it clear from day one that he was there to modernize the operations and maximize investor returns by squeezing the subcontractors. He looked at construction not as a physical craft of steel and concrete, but as a series of cost centers on a spreadsheet that needed to be trimmed. We won the structural foundation subcontract. The contract was valued at $12 million, which was the largest single contract Miller Foundations had ever taken on. It involved drilling 62 deep shafts, each 4 feet in diameter and 80 feet deep, inserting massive steel rebar cages, and pouring high-strength structural concrete. It was a massive undertaking, requiring our crews to work double shifts to meet the developer's aggressive timeline. I personally supervised the first month of drilling, ensuring that every shaft reached the solid Austin chalk limestone layer. The work was demanding, but my team was flawless. We logged every pour, performed slump tests on every truckload of concrete, and kept meticulous records of the steel yield strength certifications. For the first 4 months, everything seemed to be going according to plan. We submitted our monthly progress billing requests, and after the usual corporate reviews, the payments were wired to our account. I paid my crew, paid the material suppliers, and kept the machinery running. But as we entered the final phase of the foundation work, the payments began to slow down. A check that was supposed to take 15 days took 30. Then 45. When I asked the accounting department, they blamed administrative transitions. By the time we were 95% complete with the foundation, Sterling Development owed us $4.2 million in unpaid progress invoices, plus the 10% contract retainage of $1.2 million, bringing the total outstanding balance to $5.4 million. My crew had worked in the blistering Texas heat, pouring their sweat into the foundation that would support Ryan Sterling's grand commercial dream, but instead of paying us, The developer was holding on to our money. I had to draw down on my company's operating line of credit just to cover payroll and keep the concrete suppliers from cutting us off. I was paying interest on money that should have been in my bank account, while Ryan Sterling was driving a brand new Porsche and boasting to local business journals about how the project was coming in under budget. I tried to schedule meetings with Arthur, but his administrative assistant kept telling me he was out of the country or in private investor meetings. Every time I tried to discuss the unpaid balances with Ryan Sterling, he brushed me off, telling me that the final reconciliation would happen once all the shafts were completed. I realized then that they weren't just running behind on their paperwork. They were setting a trap. They wanted us to finish the work, and then they were going to find a way to avoid paying us the $5.4 million. They thought that a medium-sized subcontractor like Miller Foundations wouldn't have the legal teeth or the financial stamina to fight back against a major developer. They were about to learn that you never build a $60 million building on a foundation you stole. And the direct confrontation happened on a scorching Thursday afternoon in early October. We had just finished pouring the 61st shaft, leaving only one final pour to complete the entire $12 million foundation contract. I was in our temporary field trailer, reviewing the quality control logs, when Ryan Sterling walked in. He was accompanied by a man named Gregory Vance, a self-proclaimed independent quality consultant, whom Ryan had hired a week prior. I had never seen Gregory on a construction site before. He looked like the kind of consultant who wrote reports in air-conditioned offices rather than inspecting active job sites. Ryan Sterling began, his voice dripping with forced corporate concern. "We have a serious issue. Gregory here has completed a sonic logging and integrity audit on the foundation shafts we poured last month. The results are deeply concerning." I stood up from my drafting table, keeping my expression neutral. "Concerning how, Ryan?" My team performed cross-hole sonic logging on every single shaft, and the density reports showed zero anomalies. We hit 80-foot bedrock and verified the bottom cleanliness of every hole. Gregory Vance stepped forward, sliding a glossy binder across the desk. "According to my analysis, shafts 14 through 18 show significant concrete segregation and structural voids at the 50-foot mark. The integrity of the load-bearing columns is compromised. We cannot allow the steel framing contractors to erect the structure on these foundations." I opened the binder. The data was a joke. It was filled with vague graphs, uncalibrated sensor readings, and lacked any official stamp from a certified structural engineer in the state of Texas. It was a completely fabricated report, designed to create a pretext for default. "This report isn't worth the paper it's printed on, Gregory," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "These tests weren't performed by an accredited lab. Our concrete was supplied by Texas Ready Mix, and every batch had a certified 5,000 psi compressive strength test at 28 days. We have the cylinder break reports right here." "The developer's consultant report is final," Ryan Sterling interrupted, a smug smile spreading across his face. "Under Section 14.3 of our contract, if you fail to deliver structurally sound work, it constitutes a material breach. We are terminating Miller Foundation's contract for default, effective immediately." He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a formal termination notice. "Additionally, because you have breached the contract, we are withholding the outstanding $4.2 million in progress billings and the $1.2 million in retainage. We will use those funds to cover the remediation costs. We've already contracted Vanguard Concrete to finish the final pour and repair the defective shafts." I looked at the termination paper, then at Ryan. He was trying to steal $5.4 million of our hard-earned money using a fake inspection report. If I signed this or walked away quietly, my business would be ruined. The line of credit would be called in, and I would have to lay off 40 men who had been loyal to me for decades. "There's more," Ryan Sterling added, his tone growing even more arrogant. "To ensure the remediation work isn't delayed, we are invoking the emergency equipment clause. You must leave your 2 IMT drilling rigs and casing equipment on site for Vanguard Concrete's use. If you attempt to remove them, we will sue you for project disruption and have the police arrest your crew for grand larceny. He thought he had me cornered. He thought that because they were the big developer with high-priced lawyers, I would panic, sign a settlement for pennies on the dollar, and let them keep my equipment. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I simply picked up the termination notice, folded it neatly, and placed it in my pocket. "Understood," I said quietly. "We will vacate the site." Ryan Sterling looked surprised by my lack of resistance. He probably expected me to beg for a compromise. "A very sensible decision, Ryan," he said, turning to walk out. "Make sure your crews are off the site by 5 o'clock. As soon as he left, I called my foreman, Hector. "Hector, shut down the rigs, clean the tooling, pack up the trucks, and get everyone ready to move. We're vacating." "But boss," Hector protested, "what about the rigs? We can't leave them here for Vanguard. Those are our lifelines." "We aren't leaving them, Hector. I want you to call West Texas Heavy Haulers. Tell them I need 3 lowboy trailers at the main gate at precisely 4:30 p.m. We are moving our rigs off this site today." "What about Sterling's threat to call the police?" Hector asked. "Let him call them," I replied. "The equipment is registered to Miller Foundations, and we have the titles in our office. There is no court order preventing us from moving our own property. Ryan Sterling is bluffing. We leave nothing for them." At 4:45 p.m., as the heavy haulers loaded our massive million-dollar drilling rigs onto the lowboys, Ryan Sterling ran out of the field office, screaming at the drivers and trying to block the gate with his Porsche. I stood by the gate, my phone in hand, recording the entire incident. When the police arrived, I showed them the equipment registration titles, the subcontractor agreement, and the termination letter Ryan had handed me just hours before. The police officer turned to Ryan Sterling and told him that this was a civil contract dispute, and they could not legally prevent me from removing my own equipment. As the lowboys rumbled down the highway, carrying our gear safely back to our yard, Ryan Sterling stood in the cloud of dust, shaking his fist and shouting that he would ruin me. I just smiled, got into my truck, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. The war had officially begun, and I was about to drop a concrete block on their spreadsheets. My lawyer was Sarah Jenkins, a sharp 52-year-old construction attorney who had spent 30 years dismantling bad contracts and protecting subcontractors in Texas. Sarah didn't look like a corporate shark. She wore reading glasses on a chain and had a quiet, maternal demeanor. But in a courtroom, she was a timber rattlesnake. I laid out the contract, the fake quality report, the unpaid invoices, and the termination letter on her conference table. Sarah put on her glasses, scanned the documents, and let out a soft whistle. "Ryan Sterling is an idiot," she said, a cold smile touching her lips. "He thinks he's playing some high-stakes corporate game, but he doesn't know the local rules of engagement. In Texas, the law protects the people who actually build the buildings, not the people who finance them." "What's our move, Sarah?" I asked, leaning forward. "My credit line is maxed out. I can hold on for maybe 3 weeks before the bank starts breathing down my neck. I need that $5.4 million. We aren't going to sue them for breach of contract, Ryan," Sarah said, taking off any glasses. "A breach of contract lawsuit in Texas takes 2 to 3 years to reach a trial. By then, Sterling Plaza would be finished, sold, and the entity that contracted you would be dissolved or bankrupt. We need an immediate, high-velocity leverage point. We are going to trigger a dual-strike kill switch, a mechanic's lien combined with a lender-trapping stop payment notice." She pulled up the Texas Property Code, Chapter 53, on her monitor. "Under Texas law, since you dealt directly with the owner, Sterling Development, you have a constitutional lien under Article 16, Section 37 of the Texas Constitution. It's automatic, but we are also going to file a formal statutory mechanic's lien against the property title at the Travis County Clerk's office. That will cloud the title and make it impossible for them to sell the property, refinance, or lease it to major tenants." "But does that stop the cash flow?" I asked. "A lien can sit on a title for months before anything happens." "That's where the second strike comes in," Sarah explained, her eyes gleaming. "Under Texas Property Code Section 53.056, we will draft and serve a formal stop payment notice, commonly known as a trapping notice, directly to their construction lender, First National Bank of Texas. This notice legally traps the construction loan funds in the bank's hands." She tapped the screen. "Once the bank receives this notice, They are legally required to withhold the claimed amount, $5.4 million, from any future construction loan draws to the developer. If the bank fails to trap these funds and continues to pay Sterling Development, the bank itself becomes personally liable to us for every dollar they release. No bank on earth will take that risk. They will freeze their construction draws immediately. And what about their loan agreement with the bank? I asked, knowing how strict commercial lenders could be. I've already pulled the public deed of trust and the mortgage covenants for the Sterling Plaza property, Sarah said, sliding a printout toward me. Look at Section 9.2. It's a standard commercial loan covenant. It states that if any mechanic's lien or construction claim exceeding $100,000 is filed against the property, the developer must either bond around it or have it fully released within 10 business days. If they fail to do so, the entire $45 million construction loan is declared in default. The bank can accelerate the loan, demand immediate repayment, and foreclose on the land. I stared at the document. So if we file the lien and serve the trapping notice, the bank freezes their money, and if they don't settle with us in 10 days, they lose the entire project. Exactly, Sarah said. And there's a third pressure point, the pre-lease agreements. I have contacts in the commercial real estate market. The anchor tenants for Sterling Plaza, including Whole Foods and REI, have signed leases with strict delivery of possession deadlines. If the developer fails to deliver the retail shells by November 1st, the tenants have the right to cancel their leases. That's $15 million in pre-leased valuation gone. If the site goes dark for even a week, Ryan Sterling's project is dead in the water. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe a sigh of relief. A cold sense of focus settled over me. We spent the weekend drafting the paperwork. We compiled every daily log, every concrete delivery ticket, every QA report, and the certified test results showing our foundation shafts were structurally perfect. Sarah drafted a comprehensive, rock-solid affidavit of lien detailing the exact amount owed, $4,200,000 in unpaid progress billings, and $1,200,000 in contract retainage. On Monday morning at exactly 8:30 a.m., Sarah's paralegal walked into the Travis County Clerk's office and recorded the $5.4 million lien against the Sterling Plaza property. At 9:15 a.m., a certified process server walked into the Austin headquarters of First National Bank of Texas and hand-delivered the stop payment notice to the Senior Vice President of Commercial Lending, along with a copy of the recorded lien. The fuse was lit. The clock was officially ticking. Ryan Sterling had 10 business days to save his family's empire, and he had no idea the ground beneath him was about to shake. And the reaction from the Sterling camp was instantaneous and chaotic. On Monday afternoon, only a few hours after the stop payment notice was served, the senior VP of commercial lending at First National Bank of Texas called a halt to all construction loan disbursements. The bank's legal department was not about to risk a $5.4 million personal liability claim. They froze the October loan draw, which was scheduled to be released that Wednesday. This freeze had a cascading, devastating effect on the entire project. Without the bank draw, Sterling Development could not pay the general contractor, who in turn could not pay the other subcontractors. By Tuesday morning, the word had spread like wildfire through the Austin construction community. The steel fabricators, the framers, the electrical subcontractors, and the plumbing crew all realized that the project's funding was frozen. One by one, the other subcontractors stopped work. The hum of heavy machinery, the screech of metal saws, and the shouting of workers faded away. The Sterling Plaza job site, which had been a hive of activity, went completely silent. Over 300 workers walked off the job, refusing to lift a finger until their payments were guaranteed. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang. It was Ryan Sterling. I let it ring. He called 3 more times, then sent a text message. "Miller, you need to call me immediately. Your illegal lien is disrupting the entire project. We are preparing to file a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against you for tortious interference and slander of title. Turn the system back on and release the lien, or we will ruin you." I forwarded the text to Sarah and blocked his number. By Friday, the situation had escalated from a project delay to a full-blown financial catastrophe for Sterling Development. The commercial real estate broker for Whole Foods had seen the silent job site and sent a formal notice to Arthur Sterling, demanding written assurances that the building would be delivered by the November 1st deadline. Under the terms of their lease, if construction was halted for more than 7 consecutive days, or if the developer failed to provide proof of adequate financing, the tenant could terminate the lease and sue for relocation damages. Arthur Sterling, who had been in London securing additional equity partners, flew back to Austin on a red-eye flight. He walked into his office on Friday morning to find his bank loan frozen, his job site deserted, his anchor tenants threatening to walk, and his nephew Ryan panic-stricken. Hiding in his office, Arthur was old school, and he immediately recognized that they were on the brink of complete ruin. He bypassed his nephew's aggressive legal strategy and had his corporate counsel call Sarah Jenkins to request an emergency settlement meeting. "They want to meet on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Sarah told me over the phone on Friday afternoon." Arthur Sterling called my partner directly. He was polite, but you could hear the sweat in his voice. He knows they have 5 days left before the bank declares a formal loan default. "Are we ready?" I asked. "We are more than ready, Ryan," Sarah said. "I've subpoenaed the correspondence between Ryan Sterling and Gregory Vance. We found emails showing that Ryan Sterling had promised Gregory a $10,000 bonus if he wrote a report that justified terminating your contract. We have them dead to rights on fraud, bad faith termination, and filing false reports. We don't just want our $5.4 million. We're going to make them pay for every day we were off the job." On Monday morning, the weather was cool and crisp as I walked into the conference room of Sarah's office. Arthur Sterling was already sitting at the table. He looked tired, his hair slightly disheveled, a far cry from the confident developer I had worked with years ago. Ryan Sterling sat next to him, but the arrogance was gone. He looked pale, his hands trembling slightly as he fidgeted with a gold pen. They were accompanied by their lead corporate counsel, a senior partner from a prominent downtown Austin firm. Arthur looked up as I entered. "Ryan," he said, his voice quiet, "thank you for meeting with us. I think this whole situation has gotten out of hand and we need to find a reasonable way forward." I sat down, placing my notebook on the table. "I agree, Arthur," I said calmly. "But the path forward starts with you paying for the work my men poured into your dirt. We have a report showing structural issues." Ryan Sterling began, his voice cracking slightly. "Shut up, Ryan," Arthur snapped, turning a furious glare on his nephew. "Your consultant report is a fabrication, and you know it. I've seen the emails, and I've seen the certified cylinder test reports from the concrete plant. We are here to settle this like professionals." He turned back to me, his expression weary. "What are your terms, Ryan?" "The bank has frozen our draws, and we need this lien released today." Sarah Jenkins smiled, sliding a typed settlement agreement across the table. "Our terms are very simple, Arthur," she said, "and they are non-negotiable." The settlement agreement that Sarah Jenkins laid out on the table was a masterpiece of legal leverage. It was designed to extract every dollar owed to Miller Foundations, plus interest, damages, and legal fees, while permanently removing the toxic element that had caused the crisis. "First," Sarah began, pointing to the first clause, "Sterling Development will pay Miller Foundation $4,200,000 in outstanding progress billings. Second, you will release the $1,200,000 in contract retainage immediately, rather than waiting for the completion of the entire project. Third, you will pay an additional $1,200,000 in delay damages, equipment rental fees for the time our rigs were blocked, and our full attorney fees." Ryan Sterling gasped. "That's $6,600,000. That's more than $1 million over the contract value. That's highway robbery." Arthur Sterling didn't say a word. He just stared at the paper, his jaw tight. "It is the cost of your bad faith, Ryan," Sarah replied smoothly, her voice cool and professional. "If you do not sign this agreement by 12 o'clock today, we will file a formal civil fraud and racketeering lawsuit against you personally and against Sterling Development. We will name Gregory Vance as a co-defendant. We have the emails where you promised him a $10,000 kickback to falsify the sonic logging report. If that lawsuit is filed, it becomes a public record. The bank will declare a formal default on your $45 million loan, and Whole Foods will cancel their lease. You will lose the entire project, and you will likely face a criminal investigation by the district attorney. The silence in the room was deafening. The developer's corporate lawyer leaned over and whispered in Arthur Sterling's ear for several minutes. The lawyer's face was grave, nodding slowly as he explained the reality of their position. They had zero leverage. They were standing on a trapdoor, and our hands were on the lever. Arthur Sterling looked up, his eyes resting on his nephew. The look was one of pure, cold disappointment. "There is one final condition," I added, looking at Arthur. "Ryan Sterling must be permanently removed as project director for Sterling Plaza. He will have no further involvement in the management of this project, and he will not be permitted to enter the job site. I will not work with a thief, and my men will not work on a site where he has authority." Ryan Sterling stood up, his face red with embarrassment. "Uncle Arthur, you can't let them do this. We can fight this in court. We have resources." "Sit down, Ryan," Arthur said, his voice flat. "You almost ruined a 30-year-old company to show how smart you are. You lied to me, you falsified reports, and you put our entire family's assets at risk. You are done. Pack your desk today." He looked at his lawyer, then at me. "We will sign, Ryan. The wire transfer for $6,600,000 will be executed within the hour. Once the funds are confirmed in your escrow account, your lawyer will file the lien release." "We will file the release only after the funds have fully cleared," Sarah clarified. "Not a moment before," agreed, Arthur said. He picked up his pen and signed the agreement. Ryan Sterling was forced to sign as well, his hand shaking so badly he could barely write his name. By 11:30 a.m., the wire transfer of $6,600,000 was confirmed in Sarah's client trust account. I called Hector immediately. "Hector, the money is in. We are releasing the lien. Tell the crew we are officially paid, with a nice bonus for everyone's trouble." "Copy that, boss," Hector shouted over the phone, and I could hear the cheers of the guys in the background. The lien release was filed at the Travis County Clerk's office at 11:45 a.m. By 1 o'clock, the bank unfroze the construction draws, and the job site hummed back to life. But Ryan Sterling was not there to see it. He had been escorted out of the Sterling development offices by security, his personal belongings packed in a cardboard box, his reputation in the Texas construction industry permanently ruined. Arthur Sterling took over the project management personally. He reached out to me a week later, offering a sincere apology and asking if my crew would be willing to consult on the final foundation inspections. I agreed, but at a premium consulting rate. Looking back, it was a hard lesson for the developers, but a necessary one. Ryan Sterling thought that because he had an MBA and a fancy suit, he could squeeze the people who did the real work. He thought the foundation of a building was just concrete and rebar, but he forgot that the real foundation of any business is trust, respect, and the law. I retired 3 years later, handing the keys of Miller Foundations and Structural over to Hector and my daughter. But every time I drive past Sterling Plaza, I look at the massive retail shops and the office towers rising into the Austin skyline, and I smile. It's a beautiful development, and the best part is the foundation belongs to me.